The first time I saw him, I knew I wanted him. Not in a fleeting or childish way. No, it was something far deeper. Gabriel Moreau was the kind of professor who didn't just teach. He captivated. With every word that escaped his lips, every movement he made, the entire room hung on to him. There was an undeniable magnetism about him. Charismatic, brilliant, and to top it all off, devastatingly attractive. I watched him closely, more than I should have. He was standing at the front of the classroom, writing something on the board. The way his hands gripped the marker, how his lips parted slightly when he spoke, the subtle shift in his expression when he focused. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. Each subtle movement made me want him more. He was unaware of my gaze at first, but I was aware of his. When our eyes finally met, something electric passed between us. A fleeting moment, but it lingered, much like the way the tension built in my chest. I wanted to possess him, his mind, his body, his very soul. And I would. I started small, subtle, calculated. I stayed after class, pretending to go over some notes, when in reality, I was watching him, waiting for him to notice me. And he did. I asked him questions, simple, innocent ones at first. "Professor, could you clarify that point on the board?" Or, "I was thinking about what you said earlier, and I wanted to ask." It wasn't really about the questions. It was about the way he responded to me. The way his gaze softened. The brief moments when his lips would part as if he was considering something more than just my question. And then, there was the touch. It was small, almost unnoticeable. My fingers brushed his as he handed me back a paper. It was an accident, of course, but I could see the way he paused, the way his eyes narrowed for just a second. He noticed me, but he resisted. "You're a brilliant student, Lena," he said one evening, his voice warm but distant. "But you shouldn't waste your time on things that don't matter." I smiled, a soft, confident smile. "I'm not wasting my time, Professor." He didn't respond, but I could see it in his eyes. The hesitation, the tiny crack in his resolve. I upped the ante. I started dressing differently, more carefully, not revealing but deliberate. Each outfit chosen to flatter my body felt like a weapon, a tool, and I used it. I let the scent of my perfume linger in the air, knowing he would catch a whiff of it when I walked by. I wanted him to want me, to need me. One evening I found him alone in the library. The hum of the fluorescent lights was the only sound around us. I approached, my heart racing, but I remained calm, poised. "Professor Moreau," I said, letting my voice drop low, just enough to be seductive. "Lena," he replied, his tone cautious, but his eyes were already on me, watching, waiting. I slid a book across the table, my fingers brushing the edges. "It's a collection of poetry I think you'd like." He glanced at it, then at me, his gaze lingering longer than it should have. For the first time, I held his attention, and I saw it in his eyes, the hunger, the desire. I knew then that I had him. A week later, it happened. I accidentally ran into him after hours. It was late, and the hallways were deserted, the silence oppressive. "Professor," I said, my voice breathless. "I didn't know you'd still be here." He hesitated. "You should go home, Lena." But I wasn't going anywhere. Not now. I stepped closer, just a fraction. Close enough that our proximity could no longer be ignored. "And if I don't want to?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples, a sign of the stress I was causing him. You don't understand how dangerous this is. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Then why do you look at me like that? He didn't answer, because we both knew. He looked at me like a man who was torn between what he should do and what he wanted to do. The next time we were alone, it happened. It was inevitable, really. The tension between us had been building for weeks, and I could see it in his eyes. Hesitation, fear, but something darker too. Something undeniable. You need to stop, he whispered, his voice rough. I stepped forward, undeterred. Or what? He clenched his fists at his sides, fighting to keep his composure. His muscles tightened, his breath shallow. He was losing control, and I could feel the shift. Or I'll walk away, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. And if you don't? I taunted. And then it happened. His lips crashed into mine, fierce, desperate. All the restraint he had tried to hold on to came crashing down, and we both gave in. We both knew we had crossed a line, and neither of us wanted to go back. After that night, we couldn't stop. Each stolen moment felt like we were playing with fire. Every glance in class, every subtle touch in the hallways. Dangerous. Reckless. At night, we met in his apartment. The world outside didn't exist. There were no expectations, no boundaries. Just us, lost in each other, in the darkness where no one could see. I should have been afraid. We both should have been. But we weren't. It was impossible to resist. But then something shifted. Gabriel started pulling away. His eyes, once filled with longing, now held something else. Worry, guilt, fear. We can't keep doing this, he muttered one night after we'd been together. His voice was strained, his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. You don't mean that, I said, reaching out to touch his arm. He flinched, pulling away from me. This will end badly, he said, his tone final. I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. Then let's not think about the end. And just like that, he gave in again. Emma had started watching us. I noticed her lingering glances during class, the way she would stare at us almost too intently. It was obvious. She knew something was going on. One day, I saw her talking to Gabriel after class. I felt the familiar sting of jealousy. She was too close to him, too familiar. It made my blood boil. She knew. And I knew deep down that she would use it against me. Emma cornered me after class one day. Her arms were crossed, her gaze icy. I know what you're doing, she said, her voice low and threatening. I smirked, trying to mask the unease in my chest. And? I challenged. You think you can get away with this? She sneered, taking a step closer. I leaned in, my voice low, calm. I don't think, I whispered. I know. But even as I said the words, doubt began to creep in. Was I really in control anymore? That night, we made a mistake. We were careless, so reckless. We met in his office, a place we had both grown accustomed to, where no one would ever look for us. The door was slightly ajar, and I felt the prickle of awareness that we were being watched. I didn't know by who, but I felt it. Someone was watching. I could sense it in the air, the tension, the heat. I didn't know who it was, but I knew it didn't matter. The next day, I saw it in her eyes. Emma knew. She was smug, walking past me with a knowing smirk. I could see it now. She had been watching us. And now she was going to play her hand. I tried to warn Gabriel, but he wasn't taking me seriously. "You're being paranoid, Lena," he said, dismissing me with a wave. But I wasn't paranoid, and soon everyone would know the truth. Gabriel started avoiding me. His coldness was palpable. "Emma is watching us," I told him, feeling the weight of the situation. "So what?" he responded, his voice hard. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You don't care." His silence was deafening, and that silence was the answer I had feared. Then it happened. A video of us in his office. Emma had filmed it, and now she had the ultimate weapon. The message came in that night. "Obey me, or everyone will know." She wasn't just watching. She was playing her own game now, and she wasn't going to stop until she had me in her grasp. But she underestimated me. The next day, the video was everywhere. It spread like wildfire. Students, professors, the administration. There was no escaping it. Gabriel was suspended immediately. His career was over. And my name? It was on every whisper, every stare. Everything fell apart in the span of hours. Gabriel refused to see me. "I'm finished, Lena," he said, his voice hollow. "We can fix this," I pleaded, but he laughed bitterly. "You still don't understand. You ruined me." And maybe I had. Maybe we both had. I became a ghost at school. The stares, the whispers, the judgment. It felt like I was drowning. The university was deciding whether to expel me, but I already knew what I had to do. I stayed locked in my room for days, my mind a storm of confusion. Should I go back, try to fix it, or walk away? For the first time in my life, I didn't have the answer. One morning, I woke up. I stared at my reflection, not recognizing the person staring back at me. Then I grabbed my bag and I walked out the door. Because no matter what, I wasn't the type to run.
Two hearts in the dark, chasing whispers through the night. Secrets buried in the stars, hidden in the pale moonlight. Every glance feels like a spark, every word just out of reach. We're dancing close but standing still.